Good morning. We are gonna make my favorite sourdough sandwich loaf. This recipe makes 2 loaves, and this is a 2-loaf recipe, which is great because I usually will make this about once every other week and it lasts us about 2 weeks. When it comes to sourdough, I am a sandwich loaf person. I don't usually make a whole lot of artisan or round loaves. For some reason, I'm not a pro at those yet. So I'm always just doing the sandwich loaf. They're so easy to make, and I think go into like a more from scratch, trying to change the way that you consume food. I think making your own bread is probably the first change that you can make. One, it's extremely inexpensive, and 2, it's relatively easy. If you look at the ingredients in bread from just like the grocery store, there's so many more ingredients than just like probably the 5 that's in my sandwich loaf recipe. It's so much cheaper. I buy, especially if you're doing sourdough, because you're not even having to buy yeast. So I'm gonna grab that. This is my starter. I fed her last night around 10 o'clock. The thing that's really nice about living in Michigan where it's kind of cold, you can feed your starter at night and it stays in its peak form for a much longer time than if it's super warm, even though it does take a little bit longer for it to get to its peak point. So I always start my sandwich loaf recipe with a microwave safe, and I'm going to put butter and milk in here, and I'm going to melt it in the microwave. So I'm doing a whole cup. I'm going to put this in the microwave for about half power so it gets nice and melty before I add the milk in there. The one thing that I think makes all of my sandwich loaf recipes so much more fluffy and squishy and delicious is using milk instead of water. I think it helps hold everything together, and I think it actually helps the yeast in my starter actually activate a little bit better, and it makes it way more fluffy and helps keep it from crumbling after you bake it. The one thing you really want in a sandwich loaf recipe is one that's not gonna break apart after it's been baked. So I have my butter partially melted. I'm gonna add my milk, 2.5 cups, or about 600 grams, for about 2 minutes on half. So this is milk and the melted, like halfway melted butter. You add this to the KitchenAid, and then I'm gonna add the rest of my milk. While that is heating up, I'm going to go ahead and add honey. I'll do honey, or I will add maple syrup, or sometimes I'll even just do regular like cane sugar. I do about 25-ish grams of honey, for like 2 tablespoons. I really don't prefer it to be that sweet. So I'm just gonna pour in that. Okay, that's good. We have the rest of my milk going in here, and I'm going to cream this kind of together for just a minute before I add anything else. I am adding a big tablespoon. I'm going to mix that in really well with the milk and the butter before I add my starter. This is what my starter is looking like right now. She's more than doubled in size since I fed it, and this is gonna work perfectly. Once that salt is mixed in there, I'm gonna go ahead and add the starter. About a cup, 225 grams. It was 23 grams, so that's plenty. And then I'm gonna start adding the flour in. This is going to be cup number 3. It's still very shaggy, definitely not enough. After about 3 cups, this is what it's starting to look like at 4 cups. So it's definitely starting to kind of get a little form and take shape a little bit. If you don't keep them in the fridge, they'll last you about 5 days. What I do when I make 2 loaves is I always keep them in the fridge. Generally they keep pretty good in the fridge for about 2 weeks, if not longer. That is 5. I should scrape the size. So I have the 6th cup in there. I think that's gonna be enough. As you can see, it's kind of getting all over the place. I think that's gonna be enough. So I am going to let that run on 2 on my KitchenAid until it gets to see if I need to add any more flour. So I ended up with about 8 cups of flour in there. So it's kind of funny how sometimes it wants more, sometimes it wants less. I'm letting this go on a 2 setting on my KitchenAid, or you can knead it by hand, however you want to do it, for about 8-ish minutes just to get the dough fully incorporated and fully hydrated. And then we will jump into the bulk fermentation. This is the consistency dough. This is how I kind of know my dough is ready for that initial ferment, is that it kind of it passes what they call the window pane test. Get your dough counter. Get your dough, and if you can stretch it and spread it out to where you can kind of see light coming through it without it breaking, that's when it's ready to go. So as you can see, like right here, I can see the light coming through it. Did break a little bit. To my bowl for bulk fermentation. So we've got a ceramic bowl. I'm gonna line the bowl with avocado oil. You can use butter, coconut oil, any oil to keep the inside of the bowl nice and saturated. Biggest thing you don't want during your bulk fermentation is for your dough to dry out. Dump her in there. She's nice and covered. And then I'm going to use a grocery bag to cover my bowl. You can use either like a damp towel, a shower plastic is actually a really good one. I always just use grocery bags. I feel like that helps. It don't really work because you have to constantly continue to dampen them. Otherwise it'll dry out your bread. So I just avoid those altogether. Or you can use plastic, but then you have to throw it away when you're done with it. I'm going to let this bulk ferment for about 6 hours, or really until I'm ready to deal with it again. So probably later this afternoon. It's 9:30 right now, and I'm going grocery shopping, so I'll just leave this here to bulk ferment. And I don't do any kind of stretch and folds with my sandwich loaves. You can do a stretch and fold if you want to. I just don't have the time to do it because I'm leaving. What I am going to do though is I'm about to switch my laundry into my dryer, and I'm going to set this on top of my dryer to help get it a little bit extra heat to ferment a little bit quicker. O'clock, and this is what the dough currently looks like. There's not really any bubbles on top, but that doesn't really bother me. The way that I like to tell if my dough is ready is just if I kind of lightly tap it. If it bounces back pretty quickly, that's about the time when I feel like it's ready to go ahead and get shaped into the sandwich loaves. Find a good spot to set this down to where you can see it. How's that look? I'm just gonna move all my junk out of the way. I am slowly devolving into post-holiday sickness, and my kitchen is not quite the way that I would like it to be. So really all I do with my sandwich loaves is I dump it out onto my surface. I do have a bench scraper, but I don't feel like pulling it out. I usually just use this giant meat cleaver to pull it apart. I like to pull it out and flatten it into a square, nice and evenly flat, which actually I'm gonna put it all back together for a second because and then I pinch each side in, and then I do like this, and you can kind of tell it is something resembling a loaf shape. I'm not too picky about the way that it looks. These are my loaf pans. I have this is like a silicone mold loaf pan, and it actually works pretty. What are you doing? She's not feeling well either. It actually works pretty well for loaves. And then this is a Nordic ware loaf pan that I actually really love. I'm completely out of parchment paper right now, but what I have been doing is just lining the pan with oil worked pretty well for me. I usually put whatever is like this rough rectangle shape. Maybe about as, this is probably like about as wide as your loaf pan. And then roll that bad boy up, pinch the edges, and just kind of, I don't know, I don't even really know like what the name of this action motion is, but it's like you're kind of just tightening the loaf a little bit. And then I just plop that bad boy in there. These will probably sit really until I'm ready to deal with them, an hour and a half to 2 hours. Some people might think that's too long, but for me that works. Maybe even an hour. My house is freezing, so it doesn't, they don't get big very quickly. Again, I just put them, cover them with plastic bag, and they will rise in about 2 hours. So these are my loaves. I don't really wait for them to double in size, just till they kind of like fill out the space of the pans. Just sprinkle the top of both with some flour, and I don't have like a bread lame or anything like that, so I just use a serrated steak knife, and I just run a line down the top. Sometimes I will do an egg wash, but I don't really want to waste an egg on it. So, and I'm just gonna throw these at 350 in the oven for 35 minutes.
These are the finished loaves. They took about 40 minutes and they are delicious and beautiful. Ignore my cast iron. We just used it. That's butter, not mold. I promise. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you later. these are the finished loaves. They took about 40 minutes and they are delicious and beautiful. Ignore my cast iron. We just used it. That's butter, not mold. I promise. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you later.